The Galactic Council sent a human to Station Kepler-9 with 12 armed guards and a diplomatic apology. Security officer Vexter watched the transport dock through reinforced glass, mandibles clicking in disbelief. They're bringing a Deathworlder here, to a research platform. His partner, a Centaurian named Lyra with 4 eyes and silver scales, tapped her datapad. The council calls it cultural integration. They think if we chain her properly during orientation, she'll learn humility. Vexter laughed, a sound like grinding metal. We're about to teach a human what happens when you underestimate station protocol. The airlock hissed open at 800 hours, and the guards dragged in a girl who couldn't have been older than 20 standard years. Her name was Kiera Holt, according to the manifest. She wore a gray jumpsuit 2 sizes too large, and her wrists were already bound in restraints designed for species twice her mass. Her auburn hair hung in a messy braid, and her hazel eyes swept the docking bay with the kind of calm that made Vexter's carapace itch. "Station personnel," announced the lead guard, a hulking Draxian with tusks like scimitars. "We deliver this human under Article 47 of the Interspecies Safety Protocols. She is to remain restrained during orientation and socialization periods." Kiera didn't flinch. She stood there, chains clinking softly against the polished floor, and smiled. Not the nervous smile of a prisoner, something warmer, like she just walked into a coffee shop and recognized an old friend. "Hi," she said, her voice clear and surprisingly gentle. "I'm Kiera. It's really nice to meet you all." Lyra blinked, all 4 eyes in sequence. "She's polite." "Of course she is," muttered Vexter. "Deathworlders are cunning. They lure you in with pleasantries, then tear you apart when you're distracted." He stepped forward, his claws clicking on the deck plating. "Human, you will follow station regulations. Any deviation will result in escalated containment measures." Kiera nodded earnestly. "I understand. I don't want to cause any trouble." She glanced down at the chains around her wrists. "These are really heavy, though. Do I need to wear them the whole time?" "Yes," Vexter said flatly, "for your safety and ours." "Okay." Kiera shifted her weight, testing the slack in the chains. They were made of reinforced durasteel alloy, rated to hold a species with 5 times human baseline strength. The guards had laughed when they fitted them, joking about how the fragile human would collapse under the weight within an hour. Instead, Kiera lifted her arms experimentally, letting the chains swing. "They're kind of long," she observed, "like jump ropes." Lyra's scales flickered with confusion. "Jump ropes?" "Yeah, you know," Kiera demonstrated by looping the chain over her head in a slow arc. The motion was fluid, almost playful. "You spin them and jump over them. It's exercise. We did it as kids on Earth." Vexter's mandibles snapped shut. "You will not," but Kiera was already moving. She spun the chains in a wide circle, their weight humming through the air, and hopped lightly over them as they passed beneath her feet. Once, twice, 3 times. Her movements were precise, effortless, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. The security team froze. "She's playing," whispered one of the Draxian guards, his voice tinged with disbelief. Kiera stopped, slightly out of breath but grinning. "Sorry, I get restless when I'm nervous." She looked at Vexter, her expression open and apologetic. "I'll stop if it bothers you." Vexter didn't know whether to be impressed or horrified. The chains weighed at least 30 kilograms. A human shouldn't be able to lift them, let alone spin them like playground equipment. "You will proceed to your quarters," he said, his voice strained. "Immediately." "Sure thing." Kiera followed the escort team down the corridor, chains dragging behind her like a wedding train. She hummed softly under her breath, a tune Lyra didn't recognize but found oddly soothing. The quarters were small and sterile, a bunk bolted to the wall, a hygiene station, and a single viewport overlooking the star cluster beyond. Kiera sat on the edge of the bunk and looked around, her expression thoughtful. "It's cozy," she said. "Thanks for setting it up." Vexter lingered in the doorway, his instincts screaming at him to leave. You will remain here until the orientation briefing at 1400 hours. Do not attempt to remove your restraints. I won't, Kiera promised. She lifted her wrists, studying the locks with mild curiosity. These are really well made. Whoever designed them knew what they were doing. Vexter couldn't tell if she was mocking him. Compliance will be rewarded with extended privileges. Got it. Kiera lay back on the bunk, chains clinking softly. Can I ask you something? Vexter hesitated. What? Why does everyone seem so scared of humans? The question was so direct, so genuinely curious, that Vexter didn't have a prepared answer. Your species originates from a Class 12 Deathworld, he said finally. Your physiology is extreme. You survive environments that would kill most Galactic Council members within minutes. Kiera frowned. I guess that's true, but I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want to learn and maybe make some friends. Friends, Vexter repeated, testing the word. You think friendship is possible here? Why wouldn't it be? Kiera sat up, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. We're all just trying to get along, right? Vexter didn't answer. He sealed the door and walked away, mandibles clicking in irritation. The human was either the most naive creature he'd ever met or the most dangerous. He couldn't decide which was worse. At 1400 hours, the orientation briefing began in the station's main assembly hall. 200 personnel from 16 species filled the tiered seating, their attention fixed on the stage where Administrator Corvin, a towering Zenthari with crystalline skin, stood behind a podium. Today, Corvin announced, his voice resonating through the hall, we welcome our first human transfer under the Cultural Integration Initiative. This is a historic moment for Station Kepler-9. The doors at the back of the hall opened, and Kiera entered flanked by 6 guards. The chains around her wrists had been supplemented with ankle restraints, and her movements were slow and deliberate. She looked up at the crowd, waved with both hands despite the chains, and smiled. Hi, everyone, she called out. I'm Kiera. I'm really excited to be here. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some species leaned forward with interest. Others shrank back in their seats. Corvin gestured for silence. The human will demonstrate compliance with station protocols. Security Officer Vexter, proceed. Vexter stepped onto the stage, holding a data pad. Human Kiera Holt, you are required to remain restrained during all public interactions for a probationary period of 30 rotations. Do you understand? I do, Kiera said. She looked out at the crowd, her expression earnest. I know this looks weird, but I promise I'm here to learn. If anyone has questions or wants to talk, I'd love that. Vexter's carapace twitched. You are not here to socialize. You are here to prove your species can coexist peacefully. Right, Kiera said, but coexisting means talking to each other, doesn't it? A few scattered laughs echoed through the hall. Vexter's mandibles clicked in frustration. You will remain silent unless addressed directly. Kiera nodded, but her eyes never left the crowd. She studied each face, each species, as if memorizing them. And when a small, blue-feathered Avarian in the front row met her gaze, Kiera smiled and mouthed the word hello. The Avarian chirped in surprise and hid behind her datapad. Corvin cleared his throat. The human will now be escorted to her assigned duties in the hydroponics bay. That is all. The guards moved to flank Kiera again, but she paused. Can I ask one more thing? Vexter's voice was a warning growl. No. I was just wondering, Kiera continued undeterred, if anyone here likes pancakes, because I know how to make them and I thought it might be a nice way to say thank you for letting me stay. The hall went silent. Pancakes, a human offering food. The implications rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Corvin's crystalline features flickered. You will discuss this with your supervisor. He waved a hand and the guards ushered Kiera toward the exit. As she left, Kiera glanced back one more time, her smile unwavering. And in that moment, Vexter realized something terrifying. She wasn't afraid of them, not even a little. The hydroponics bay was a cathedral of green. Rows of cultivated plants from a dozen worlds stretched beneath artificial sunlight, their leaves glistening with nutrient mist. Kiera stood in the center aisle, chains pooling at her feet, and let out a slow breath. "It's beautiful," she said. Her supervisor, a fungal-based mycelium named Thren, pulsed with faint bioluminescence. "You will assist with pollination protocols in Sector 7. Do not touch any specimens without authorization." "Got it." Kiera picked up the chains, looping them over her shoulders like a makeshift harness. "Do you need help carrying anything?" Thren's spores flickered in what might have been amusement. "You are restrained. You cannot carry." Kiera lifted a crate of soil supplements that weighed 50 kilograms and balanced it on one hip. "Where does this go?" Thren went still. "That requires mechanical assistance." "Oh." Kiera set the crate down gently. "Sorry, I didn't mean to overstep." For the next 2 hours, Kiera worked in silence, her movements careful and deliberate. She pollinated flowers with a soft brush, adjusted irrigation lines, and hummed that same tune from earlier. The other workers, a mix of Avarians, Centaurians, and one nervous Draxian, kept their distance, watching her with a mixture of curiosity and fear. It was the Draxian, a young male named Caro, who finally spoke. "Why do you hum?" Kiera looked up, surprised. "It helps me focus. And it makes the plants happy." Caro's tusks twitched. "Plants cannot experience happiness." "Maybe not," Kiera said, "but it doesn't hurt to try, right?" She gently touched the leaf of a Centaurian fern. "My mom used to say that everything grows better when you talk to it." Caro edged closer, his massive frame dwarfing her. "Your mother is a botanist. She was a gardener." Kiera's voice softened. "She passed away a few years ago. Cancer." The word hung in the air. Caro didn't know what cancer was, but he understood loss. "I am sorry." "Thank you." Kiera smiled, and it was the saddest smile Caro had ever seen. "She taught me to find beauty in small things. That's why I like hydroponics. It's peaceful." Caro hesitated, then asked the question that had been gnawing at him since the briefing. "Why do they chain you?" Kiera glanced down at her restraints. "Because I'm human, and humans are strong. They're worried I'll hurt someone." "Will you?" "No." Kiera's voice was firm. "I'd never hurt anyone on purpose, but they don't know that yet, so I'll wear the chains until they trust me." Caro studied her for a long moment. "That is honorable." Kiera grinned. "Thanks, you're the first person to say that." At 1600 hours, the station-wide alarm blared. A coolant pipe had ruptured in Sector 7, flooding the hydroponics bay with toxic vapor. Thren's voice crackled over the comms. "Evacuate immediately. Seal all blast doors." The workers bolted for the exits, but Kiera froze. The vapor was spreading fast, and the emergency shutters were descending. If they sealed, anyone still inside would suffocate within minutes. Caro was at the far end of the bay, struggling to carry an injured Avarian whose wing had been caught in the blast. He wouldn't make it in time. Kiera didn't think. She ran. The chains dragged behind her, their weight slowing her down, but she pushed through the burning in her lungs and the sting of vapor in her eyes. She reached Caro just as the shutters dropped to waist height. "Give her to me," Kiera shouted. Caro hesitated, but the shutters were closing fast. He handed over the Avarian, and Kiera cradled the small creature against her chest. Then she did something that would later be analyzed in a dozen security reports. She looped the chains around her shoulders, braced her legs, and lifted. The chains pulled taut. The restraints dug into her wrists, drawing blood, but Kiera didn't stop. She lifted the chains over her head, swung them in a wide arc, and used the momentum to propel Caro toward the exit. He stumbled through the gap just as the shutters slammed shut. Kiera stood on the other side, the Avarian still clutched in her arms. The vapor thickened around her and her vision blurred. She could hear Caro pounding on the shutters, shouting her name. "I'm okay," she whispered, even though he couldn't hear her. "Just don't let her die." The shutters opened 3 minutes later. Medical teams rushed in, oxygen masks ready. They found Kiera slumped against a water tank, the Avarian cradled in her lap. Both were unconscious but breathing. Vexter arrived within seconds, his mandibles trembling with something that might have been anger or fear. "Get them to medical, now." As the medics lifted Kiera onto a stretcher, the chains slipped from her wrists. They clattered to the floor, bent and warped from the strain she'd put on them. Vexter picked one up, his claws tracing the twisted metal. "She broke them," he said, his voice barely audible, "with her bare hands." Lyra appeared at his side, her scales pale. "She didn't break free. She used them to save Caro." Vexter looked at the human being carried away, her face streaked with soot and blood. "What kind of species does that?" Lyra didn't answer, but as the medical team disappeared down the corridor, she noticed something on the floor, a small data chip that had fallen from Kiera's pocket. She picked it up, activated it, and a holographic image appeared, a woman with auburn hair and a kind smile standing in a garden. "My mom," Lyra whispered, reading the label beneath the image. "Maria Holt, 1975-2024. Vexter stared at the hologram. "She carries her dead with her." "Maybe," Lyra said quietly, "that's what makes them strong." Kiera woke in the medical bay to the sound of soft beeping and the smell of antiseptic. Her wrists were bandaged and the chains were gone. She blinked at the ceiling, her thoughts sluggish. "You're awake," said a voice. She turned her head. The Avarian, small, blue-feathered with wide amber eyes, sat perched on the edge of the next bed. Her wing was splinted, but she looked alert. "Hi," Kiera said. "Are you okay?" "Thanks to you." The Avarian chirped softly. "I'm Leary. You saved my life." "I'm just glad you're safe." Kiera tried to sit up, wincing at the ache in her ribs. "What happened to Caro?" "He's fine, angry at himself for leaving you behind." Leary hopped closer. "Everyone's talking about what you did. They're calling you the Chained One." Kiera frowned. "That's kind of dramatic." "Maybe, but it's better than Deathworlder, isn't it?" Before Kiera could respond, the door slid open. Vexter entered, his carapace gleaming under the lights. He held something in his claws, a section of the broken chain, polished and mounted on a small plaque. "Human Kiera Holt," he said formally. "Station Administrator Corvin has reviewed the incident in Sector 7. Your actions are deemed commendable." Kiera blinked. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Vexter said. "You did what no one else could do." He set the plaque on her bedside table. "The Council has decided to lift your restraint protocols. You are free to move about the station without chains." Kiera stared at the twisted metal, her throat tight. "Thank you." Vexter hesitated, then added, "You also broke station equipment. Replacement cost will be deducted from your stipend." Kiera laughed, a bright, unexpected sound that made Leary chirp in delight. "Fair enough." Word spread fast. By the time Kiera was discharged, the entire station knew her story. She walked through the corridors without chains, and the reactions were mixed. Some species nodded respectfully. Others still kept their distance, their eyes wary. But in the mess hall at 1800 hours, something changed. Kiera approached the food dispenser, unsure of what to order. The menu was filled with unfamiliar names in a dozen languages. She stood there frowning at the screen when Caro appeared at her side. "Try the Zenthari grain porridge," he suggested. "It is bland but filling." "Thanks." Kiera ordered 2 bowls and handed one to him. "Want to sit together?" Caro's tusks twitched in surprise. "You wish to dine with me?" "Why wouldn't I?" They sat at a corner table, and within minutes Leary joined them, followed by Thren and a handful of others. The group was an odd mix of species, but the conversation flowed easily. Kiera asked questions about their homeworlds, their families, their favorite foods. She listened with genuine interest, her eyes bright. "You are different from what we expected," Thren said, his bioluminescence pulsing warmly. "The reports described humans as aggressive, territorial." "Some are," Kiera admitted. "But most of us just want to belong somewhere." She glanced around the table. "I think that's universal, isn't it?" The group fell silent, considering her words. Then Leary chirped, "You promised pancakes." Kiera grinned. I did, didn't I? She stood, her movements still a bit stiff. If I can find the ingredients, I'll make them tomorrow. Deal. Deal, Leary said, her eyes sparkling. The next morning, Kiera arrived at the mess hall with a bag of supplies she'd scrounged from hydroponics and the station's limited Earth food reserves. She set up a portable cooking station and got to work, her hands moving with practiced ease. Within an hour, the smell of frying batter filled the air. Personnel trickled in, drawn by the unfamiliar aroma. Kiera flipped pancakes onto plates, adding earth maple syrup from her personal stash. "Try it," she said, handing a plate to a nervous Centaurian. "Let me know what you think." The Centaurian took a cautious bite. His scales shifted through a spectrum of colors. "This is extraordinary." By noon, there was a line stretching halfway across the mess hall. Kiera worked non-stop, her bandaged wrists protesting, but she didn't complain. She just smiled and kept cooking. Vexter watched from the doorway, his mandibles clicking softly. Lyra joined him, holding a plate of pancakes. "She's winning them over." "With food," Vexter said flatly. "With kindness," Lyra corrected. She took a bite and sighed. "These are incredible. You should try one." Vexter hesitated, then accepted a plate. The pancakes were sweet, soft, and unlike anything he'd tasted. "This is a strategic maneuver," he muttered. "Or maybe," Lyra said, "she's just a good person." That evening, Kiera returned to her quarters to find a small package waiting outside her door. Inside was a handmade bracelet woven from Avarian feathers and Centaurian silk. A note was attached. "Thank you for showing us what strength really means." Leary and the Sector 7 crew. Kiera tied the bracelet around her wrist, her vision blurring with tears. She sat on her bunk, looking out at the stars, and whispered, "I miss you, Mom, but I think I'm doing okay." The stars didn't answer, but somehow Kiera felt less alone. 3 weeks after the hydroponics incident, Station Kepler-9 hosted its quarterly security drill. The scenario: a hostile intruder breaches the station, and personnel must respond according to protocol. Vexter designed the exercise personally, and he made one critical decision: Kiera would play the intruder. "You want me to pretend to be dangerous?" Kiera asked, standing in the briefing room with Vexter and the security team. "Correct," Vexter said. "You will simulate a Deathworlder gone rogue. The team will practice containment procedures." Kiera frowned. "That seems kind of mean. What if people get scared?" "That is the point," Vexter said. "Fear sharpens instincts." Lyra, who had been listening silently, interjected. "Vex, this is a bad idea." "It is necessary," Vexter insisted. "The Council needs data on human threat response." Kiera sighed. "Okay, but I'm not going to hurt anyone." "You will not have the chance," Vexter said. "The team is prepared." The drill began at 900 hours. Kiera was given a head start and instructed to evade capture for as long as possible. The security team, 12 officers armed with stun batons and neural disruptors, tracked her through the station's maintenance tunnels. Vexter monitored from the command center, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "She has no chance. The tunnels are a maze. She will be cornered within minutes." Lyra watched the monitors, her scales pale. "Vex, look at her vitals. Her heart rate is elevated, but she's not panicking." "Of course she is panicking," Vexter said. "She is human." On the screen, Kiera moved through the tunnels with eerie calm. She didn't run. She walked, her footsteps echoing softly, and when the first security team rounded a corner, she smiled. "Hi," she said. "You found me." The officer, a Draxian twice her size, raised his stun baton. "Surrender immediately." "Okay." Kiera held up her hands. "But can I ask a question first?" The officer hesitated. "What? Why are we doing this? I thought we were past the whole humans are dangerous thing." The officer's grip on his baton faltered. "This is a drill. You are the scenario." "Right," Kiera said. "But what's the lesson?" "That you can catch me if I don't fight back." She tilted her head. "Wouldn't it be better to practice working together?" The officer didn't respond. He activated his comm. "Target located. requesting backup. Backup arrived within seconds, 3 more officers, all heavily armed. They surrounded Kiera, their weapons raised. "Last chance," the lead officer said. "Surrender or we escalate." Kiera looked at each of them in turn. "I'm not your enemy, you know that, right?" "You are the scenario," the officer repeated. "But I'm also Kiera." She lowered her hand slowly. "The person who made you pancakes last week, who helped Thren replant the ferns, who saved Leary." One of the officers, a young Centaurian, shifted uncomfortably. "She has a point." "This is a drill," the lead officer snapped. "Apprehend her." The team moved in, but Kiera didn't resist. She let them bind her wrists with stun cuffs, her expression calm. "Okay, you win." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Something about this felt wrong. In the command center, Vexter watched the feed with growing unease. "Why is she not fighting?" "Because," Lyra said quietly, "she doesn't want to hurt them." Vexter's mandibles clicked in frustration. "She is supposed to simulate a threat." "She is showing you what a real threat looks like," Lyra said. "Someone who chooses not to fight even when they could." On the screen, Kiera sat in the holding cell, her wrists bound. The officers stood outside, arguing in low voices. "This feels wrong," the Centaurian said. "She's not dangerous." "She broke reinforced chains," the lead officer countered. "She could break these cuffs if she wanted." "But she hasn't," the Centaurian said. "Doesn't that mean something?" The lead officer didn't answer. He opened the cell door and approached Kiera. "Why did you not resist?" Kiera met his gaze. "Because I trust you, and I wanted you to see that." The officer stared at her for a long moment. Then he removed the cuffs. "The drill is over." Vexter stormed into the holding area, his carapace bristling. "What are you doing? The scenario is not complete." The lead officer turned to face him. "With respect, sir, the scenario is flawed. We cannot train for a threat that does not exist." "She is a Deathworlder," Vexter hissed. "She is dangerous." "No," the officer said. "She is capable. There is a difference." Kiera stood, rubbing her wrists. "Vex, I know you're trying to protect everyone, but treating me like a threat doesn't make anyone safer, it just makes them scared." Vexter's mandibles trembled. "You could kill us all if you wanted." "I could," Kiera admitted. "But I won't, because that's not who I am." She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "And deep down, I think you know that." Vexter looked at her, this small, fragile human who had saved lives, made pancakes, and refused to fight even when cornered. And for the first time, he felt something he hadn't expected: shame. "The drill is over," he said finally. "Everyone return to your posts." That night, Kiera found Vexter in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She sat beside him without asking permission. "You were right to be cautious," she said. "I am strong, stronger than most species here." "But strength isn't the same as violence." Vexter's voice was quiet. "How do I know you will not change? That one day you will not decide we are the enemy." Kiera thought for a moment. "You don't. Just like I don't know that you won't decide I'm too dangerous to keep around." She looked at him. "But we have to trust each other anyway. That's what makes us more than just survival machines." Vexter clicked his mandibles, a sound that might have been agreement. "You are unusual," Kiera grinned. "I'll take that as a compliment." They sat in silence, watching the stars. And somewhere in the station, the broken chain mounted on a plaque caught the light, a reminder that strength isn't always about breaking free. It's about choosing not to. 6 months passed. Kiera's presence on Station Kepler-9 became routine. She worked in hydroponics, organized weekly pancake breakfasts, and even taught a few brave souls how to jump rope using exercise bands, since the chains were, as she put it, a bit much. But the station had changed in subtle ways. Leary started a mentorship program pairing new transfers with experienced personnel. Caro volunteered to lead cultural sensitivity training. Thren proposed a community garden where species could grow plants from their homeworld side by side. And Vexter, ever cautious, ever skeptical, began to see patterns he'd missed before. The human didn't just survive. She connected. She asked questions, remembered names, celebrated small victories. She turned strangers into friends and fear into curiosity. One evening, Vexter found Kiera in the hydroponics bay, kneeling beside a newly planted Zinthari crystal vine. She was humming that same tune, her fingers gentle as she adjusted the soil. "Why do you hum?" Vexter asked, echoing Caro's question from months ago. Kiera looked up, surprised but smiling. "It helps me focus, and I like to think it makes things grow better." Vexter studied the vine. It was thriving, brighter and healthier than any he'd seen. "Do you believe that?" "I believe," Kiera said, "that care matters, whether it's for plants or people." Vexter's mandibles clicked softly. "You are an anomaly." "I'm just me," Kiera said. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees. "But thank you, that's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." Vexter tilted his head. "I did not intend it as a compliment." "I know." Kiera grinned. "That's what makes it so great." The station's annual integration gala took place in the main assembly hall. 200 personnel gathered, representing 16 species and dozens of homeworlds. The event was a celebration of progress, of the fragile but growing trust that bound the crew together. Administrator Corvin stood at the podium, his crystalline features glowing. "This year has been transformative. We have learned that unity is not the absence of difference, it is the embrace of it." He gestured to the crowd. "And we have one individual to thank for showing us that truth. Kiera Holt, please join me on stage." Kiera, dressed in a simple blue dress, walked to the podium. The crowd erupted in applause, some species clapping, others chirping, humming, or pulsing with light. She stood there, slightly overwhelmed, and waved. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady. "But I didn't do this alone. Every person here made a choice to trust someone different. That's what changed things." Corvin handed her a small box. Inside was a medal, a circular emblem engraved with interlocking chains forming a continuous loop. "This is the Unity Commendation," Corvin said. "It is awarded to those who demonstrate exceptional courage and compassion. You are the first human to receive it." Kiera stared at the medal, her eyes shining. "I don't know what to say." "You have said enough," Corvin replied. "Your actions speak louder than words." After the ceremony, Kiera stood in the observation deck with Leary, Caro, Thren, Lyra, and surprisingly, Vexter. They passed around a bottle of Centaurian sparkling nectar, toasting the evening. "You did it," Leary chirped. "You changed the station." "We did it," Kiera corrected. "All of us." Caro raised his glass. "To the chained one, who showed us that freedom is not the absence of restraint, it is the choice to care even when restrained." Kiera laughed, her cheeks flushed. "That's way too poetic for me." "Poetic but accurate," Thren said, his bioluminescence warm. Vexter cleared his throat. "I apologize. For the chains, for the drill, for doubting you." Kiera looked at him, her expression softening. "You were doing your job, and honestly the chains taught me something." "What?" Vexter asked. "That strength isn't about breaking free, it's about what you do while you're still tied down." She touched the metal around her neck. "And sometimes the chains you carry become the bridge that connects you to others." Lyra's scales shimmered. "That is the most human thing I have ever heard." "Is it?" Kiera asked, grinning. "I kind of thought it was universal." They stood together in the observation deck, watching the stars. And in that moment, the station felt less like a collection of strangers and more like a home. A year later, Kiera sat in the mess hall, teaching a group of younglings how to jump rope using soft elastic bands. They giggled and stumbled, their movements clumsy but joyful. Kiera cheered them on, her laughter bright. Vexter watched from the doorway, his mandibles clicking in what might have been approval. Lyra joined him, holding 2 cups of Zinthari tea. "She is remarkable," Lyra said. "She is persistent," Vexter replied, "and irritatingly optimistic." "You like her?" Vexter's carapace twitched. "I tolerate her." Lyra smiled. "That is the same thing for you." On the other side of the hall, Kiera caught Vexter's eye and waved. He hesitated, then raised one claw in a stiff approximation of a wave. Kiera grinned and went back to teaching. The younglings formed a circle, holding hands, or claws, or tendrils, and jumped together, their laughter echoing through the station. And somewhere in the command center, the broken chain mounted on a plaque caught the light, a reminder that even the strongest restraints can become symbols of connection. That fear can transform into trust, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing about a Deathworlder is not their strength, it's their refusal to use it. Because Kiera Holt didn't break the chains to escape, she broke them to save someone else. And in doing so, she showed an entire station what it means to be human. Not invincible, not fearless, but endlessly, stubbornly kind.